Qatar Airways will buy 25% of Virgin, shaking up competition in international routes. The federal government is working to evacuate Australians in Lebanon as the conflict in the region escalates. And the latest radio ratings suggest a big shake-up in the audio world. Welcome to Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. It is Wednesday, the 2nd of October 2024. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, the main story this morning, Qatar Airways will buy 25% of Virgin Australia from its private equity owner, Bain Capital.
As part of the deal, Virgin will resume flying long-haul international routes to Europe using Qatar's planes. It means passengers get more competition in the long-haul market, and there's no need for government approval for additional flights. The deal is subject to the Foreign Investment Review Board and helps Bain start offloading its ownership of Virgin, which it took control of back in 2020 in the middle of the COVID pandemic. It will also be subject to the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission approval. Now, both Labor's Bill Shorten and opposition leader Peter Dutton welcomed the announcement. Plenty of bits and pieces in this deal. Remember last year, the federal government blocked Qatar from flying more services into Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and Perth. This somewhat circumvents that problem for Qatar. Chief Executive Officer of Virgin, Jane Herdlicker, said the investment is the missing piece in Virgin's long-term strategy, and the deal brings scale to the carrier, allowing it to better compete with Qantas. Virgin frequent flyers will also benefit.
I'll get to what it means for passengers in a sec, Sean, but what does this mean? There's been talk for a long time about the potential for an IPO that Virgin might appear back on the ASX sometime in the near future. Does this make this less likely?
Not necessarily. Bain wants to get out. In some ways, it makes it more likely because when you have someone like Qatar on your share registry, Qatar being a major player, other airlines suddenly get interested. Other investors get a bit more interested. So, in fact, it may actually help an IPO, although others would argue, well, you've got a cornerstone investor there, so others won't get involved. So it could go either way.
Okay, so then looking at it from the passenger perspective, really, what you've been saying is that the deal should be good news for passengers wanting long-haul flights, right?
Yes, I think so. I mean, since its reinvention, Virgin has been a cautious competitor. And apart from flights to, where do they go? They go Bali, Thailand, Fiji. I don't really think there's many more international routes that Virgin does. The domestic end of the market, following the collapse of Bonza and administration of Regional Express, now has a very dominant Qantas Jetstar, about 62% of the market. Virgin's got about half that level. This deal really is about international routes, and judging by the 4% drop in Qantas's share price, analysts believe it will put more competition into the market. That is good for passengers. There's more to it, though. Like Virgin gets some really serious aviation clout with Qatar as a shareholder. That could flow through to lower fuel prices. It could flow through to cheaper aircraft maintenance. Your point before, is it good or bad for an IPO? Well, it could actually attract other investors because Qatar really is a serious player, and we know Bain won't want to stay a shareholder for too much longer. Now, Qatar is also a shareholder in a bunch of other airways, so British Airways owner. It's got about 10% of Cathay Pacific. It's got an investment in South America's LATAM Airlines. Methinks, Michael, bigger things are afoot. And down the way, this could prove quite a boom for local international travellers.
To local markets, how did things go yesterday?
The S&P ASX 200 closed down 0.7% to 8,209 points. The big miners, the three big miners and the four big banks were all lower, and when that happens, it's almost inevitable that the bourse ends up in negative territory. The miners fell back after all the excitement of the previous week following a bunch of stimulus announcements in China. BHP finished down nearly 3% yesterday, while Fortescue Metals Group was off 3.5%. Now, BHP had jumped 15% in the previous 5 sessions, so the pullback yesterday, not unexpected. Rio Tinto fell 2.6%, while both Commonwealth Bank and Westpac were off at least 2.5%. The worst performer on the day was the Star Entertainment Group, which fell nearly 8% after it released its 2024 financial report, which included qualified support from its auditor based on expenses related to the new Queen's Wharf Casino precinct in Brisbane.
You mentioned the banks, Sean, and after the show, you have an interview coming up, a very topical and very timely interview with Nathan Zayer, banking analyst from Morningstar.
We do. Given how many people have shares in banks, we thought it was worth talking to Nathan about the prospects for banks particularly in terms of share prices, but also what they're going to do around interest rates and competition in the mortgage market and deposit rates and that type of thing. No one better than Nathan to chat to about these things, so we have a great talk to him about it.
Yeah, it's a good one. It is coming up after the show. What's happening in international markets?
Yesterday morning, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell spoke, saying the central bank will lower interest rates over time. He views the US economy as strong overall, with labour market conditions being solid and policymakers having greater confidence that inflation is on a sustainable path towards 2%. That helped the share market close higher yesterday morning, meaning the broad-based S&P 500 and tech-heavy NASDAQ both finished the September quarter higher. That's 4 consecutive quarters of higher returns. Brent crude's trading around $72 a barrel. Probably a bit surprising it's not higher than that, given what's going on in the Middle East. Gold is trading around $26.40 an ounce, and the Aussie dollar is worth 69.3 US cents.
Sean, today is Wednesday. Probably just stating the obvious there to you. But Wednesday obviously means something significant in the fear and greed universe, and that is that it is newsletter day.
It is newsletter day. And I've got a bit to say. I've got a bit to say about the airlines. I've got a bit to say about the economy. I quite enjoyed writing today's newsletter.
That is great because we've had a fantastic response to the newsletter since we launched it not so long ago. I did a little video, Sean, promoting the newsletter, and I posted it on LinkedIn. It's on Fear and Greed's LinkedIn. I did it last night. And there's a big trend towards walk and talk videos. You know, they call it, you know, where you hold the phone up and you talk as you're going. Yeah. So I set myself the stupidest challenge in the world, and I tried to do it going down a set of stairs at my local train station.
How'd you go?
I knew I was uncoordinated before I did it. So really, it was an OH&S nightmare, the fact that I was out there doing this on assignment for Fear and Greed. So anyway, long story short, newsletter out today. Head along to fearandgreed.com.au and sign up for it now before the newsletter drops in a few hours' time. Sean, we'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, the federal government is working to get Australian citizens out of Lebanon as Israel launches a ground invasion of the country.
Some commercial airlines are still flying to Lebanon, though there is a risk of the international airport closing. The federal government here for months has been calling on people to leave the country. The Canadian government yesterday said it had secured 800 seats on commercial flights for its citizens. Treasurer Jim Chalmers urged restraint, saying Australia was gravely concerned for the human cost of an escalation of this conflict. Now, yesterday morning, Australian time, Israeli forces crossed into southern Lebanon, marking a significant escalation of the crisis. The last time Israel and Hezbollah engaged in ground combat was a month-long war back in 2006. The Israeli military said it had begun a limited, localised and targeted ground raid against Hezbollah in the border area in southern Lebanon. Now, the raids were accompanied by renewed strikes in Beirut's southern suburbs.
Now, a bit of economic news around at the moment, Sean. Retail trade jumped a surprisingly high 0.7% in August, helped by warmer than usual weather.
Yes, particularly along the East Coast. It was the warmest month of August on record, which means since 1910. And the Bureau of Statistics suggests that people brought forward spring purchases. So some of the items people were buying does suggest they are spring purchases. So summer clothing, fair enough. Liquor, all drink more in winter, spring and summer. Outdoor dining goods, hardware, gardening items.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You're absolutely buying your fertilizers. You're buying all kinds of things. Yeah, it makes sense.
Lawn stuff, I'm sure. Camping goods, outdoor equipment. People were out there buying it. You get a bit of hot weather and all of a sudden everyone goes to Bunnings. There you go.
An absolute rush. Yeah, and you cannot get a roll of turf. Like, it's just insane.
Is that right?
Extraordinary. Yeah. And there's just this trail of kind of scattered dirt where people have just dragged them to the checkout, and you follow them and see if you can find one that someone's left. Anyway, sorry. Please go on.
I suppose given the tax cuts from July 1 and the still strong employment market, a pickup isn't really surprising. Though the size of the improvement for the month of August was a bit of a surprise. The retail sales figures jump around a bit, and when there's a boom, often soon after there's a pullback. If we've already bought all our garden hose, well, we probably don't need to buy another one the following month. Overall, retail sales are up 3.1% over the past 12 months. Mind you, there's been a big jump in population there, so it's probably not that strong a number.
And building approvals fell 6.1%, which was somewhat expected, but there are a few early signs that the building sector might have bottomed.
A large reversal of apartment approvals from last month underpinned the August building approvals fall, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics. Overall, building approvals seem to have picked up from the low point, which is a good sign, but apartment approvals remain low at around 166,000 a year, much lower than the Housing Accord's target of about 240,000 dwellings per year, too low versus the level of demand given Australia's chronic housing undersupply issue. While house price growth has slowed outside Perth, Adelaide and Brisbane, the chronic undersupply in some capitals should actually prevent any real sharp drops in prices.
Sean, REA has abandoned its $12 billion bid for Rightmove after the UK-listed real estate site knocked back REA's fourth bid in as many weeks.
Investors welcomed the news, including News Corp Chief Executive Robert Thomson, and REA's share price closed up 4.5%. Why are we interested in Robert Thomson's view on what REA is doing? Well, News Corp owns 61% of the company. Mr. Thomson said it would be foolhardy for REA to pay any more for Rightmove. Rightmove is the dominant real estate platform in the UK under British takeover rules. One of your favourites, this one, Michael. A bidder has 28 days from when its interest becomes public to formalise an offer. That meant REA's deadline came in yesterday morning. What are they called, those rules, Michael? Do you remember?
Oh, that would be the put up or shut up laws.
Yeah, that's it. Put up or shut up. REA blamed Rightmove's board for the bid's collapse, complaining of the director's cursory and procedural contact, along with a lack of meaningful engagement.
ABC staff have been subjected to systemic racism, including racial slurs, derogatory and offensive comments about their appearance, stereotyping, and being mistaken for someone else because of their racial appearance, a report released yesterday has found.
Managing Director David Anderson issued an apology to employees, both past and present, who experienced racism after the taxpayer-funded broadcaster released its independent racism review yesterday. He said anti-racism training will be rolled out at the ABC. After apologising, Mr. Anderson said the ABC needs to do better and is committed to zero tolerance for racism in its workplace. The ABC has implemented 15 recommendations, including that all staff read the report, improve diverse representation at management level, and better understand lived experiences by staff to help with storytelling and create culturally safe support systems.
Now, Sean, the latest radio ratings across the country have somewhat shifted the playing field. 2GB, the former number one station in Sydney, has slumped to fourth, while ABC's main stations in Melbourne, Adelaide and Perth have all lost ground.
The other big news from the ratings is the performance of Kiss FM's morning team of Kyle Sandilands and Jackie Henderson, Jackie O, as she's better known. Their share in Sydney fell to 13.7%. That they did come in at number one, ahead of a tumbling Ben Fordham at 2GB. But in Melbourne, where they launched earlier in the year with much fanfare, their numbers remain poor. In fact, they're down another 0.1 percentage point to 5.2%. Not going so well at the moment. 3AW remains a clear number one in Melbourne, with the breakfast and morning shows doing very well, while ARN Media's Kiss FM is number one in Sydney, according to measuring group GfK. At the ABC, the radio national flagship program RN Breakfast lost more listeners in Sydney, Melbourne and Perth. Only Breakfast in Sydney for the ABC with Craig Rucastle was a big improver.
Sigma Healthcare has said it would bring in data sharing rules to help alleviate concerns by the regulator regarding its proposed $700 million merger with Chemist Warehouse.
Yeah, a bit tech-head this, but stay with me. In June, the regulator flagged concerns that the merger could potentially harm pharmacies currently supplied by Sigma by allowing Chemist Warehouse to access those pharmacies' data in ways that could damage competition. Now, to alleviate those concerns, Sigma has said it will allow franchisees to terminate their agreements and place restrictions on the use of confidential data from Sigma wholesale customers and franchisees for a period of 3 years, according to a report in the AFR. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission is now looking for feedback from stakeholders on whether the draft undertaking offered by Sigma may be capable of addressing the competition concerns. Clearly, a bunch of shareholders think that they do, because Sigma's share price jumped 25% yesterday, easily the best of the top 200.
That's a good story. And anytime you start a story, though, with a stay with me. Yeah. It's never a good sign. But no, I stayed with you and I made the right decision.
Good.
As though there was an option just to walk out of the studio, I suppose, as the alternative. Turning to international news now. Dock workers have walked out of every major port on the US East and Gulf coasts, marking the beginning of a strike that could hurt the world's largest economy and also have political implications, considering it's just weeks now until the presidential election.
It's the biggest strike in nearly 50 years, and the affected ports have the combined capacity to handle as much as half of all US trade volume, and the strike will halt container, cargo and auto shipments, according to a report on Bloomberg. Some exceptions will be made to allow for the movement of military goods and cruise ships. The economic cost of a work stoppage at every major container port, from Houston to Miami and New York, New Jersey, will be around $4 billion a day, according to JP Morgan Chase & Co. The International Longshoremen's Association, that is a cracking name for a union, the International Longshoremen's Association is seeking higher wages and a rollback of the language on automation in new contracts.
Now, how about this one, Sean? Megalopolis, the Francis Ford Coppola film financed by the director himself, opened in the US over the weekend and really, it bombed.
It did bomb. The 85-year-old Mr. Coppola spent decades on the avant-garde fable, ultimately selling part of his wine business to raise the necessary funds, about $120 million in production costs, another $20 million or so in marketing and distribution expenses. But moviegoers, well, they didn't turn up. They rejected the film, according to a report in the New York Times. Ticket sales from Thursday night through Sunday, the opening weekend, totaled about $4 million in North America. Megalopolis played in nearly 2,000 theatres in the United States and Canada. It's about a brilliant architect, played by Adam Driver, who wants a society to lift itself out of the gutter. Ticket buyers gave the film a D+ grade in CinemaScore exit polls. Now, big budget movies, if they get a sort of less than a B-, that's a surprise, a D+. Ouch. Francis Ford Coppola, you've just lost a stack of money.
Yeah, indeed. And don't you feel sorry then for someone who has kind of spent decades kind of working towards this and planning for it? It's just it's not the way you would want to, what is potentially finish a career, right?
No, I think that's right. And he has, he of Godfather fame, Francis Ford Coppola, has created some of the greatest films ever.
Masterpieces.
So it's disappointing. Yeah, totally.
All right, up next is the Fear and Greed daily interview. Speaking of masterpieces, this chat with Nathan Zaya from Morningstar.
Overly generous, I think, there, Michael. Yep, all about the banks, prospects for the big four banks, as well as some of the regionals like Bendigo and Adelaide Bank and Bank of Queensland.
It is coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au, which is where you sign up for the free weekly newsletter, which comes out this morning. So do it now so that you don't miss out. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It is Wednesday, the 2nd of October, 2024. Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.